welcome to Experiencing Consciousness. My name is Dyba.
And I'm Dr. Kathryn Rossi. We're happy you're here. The subject that I really love to talk about, and I mean that with all sincerity, is I love to talk about transforming grief into peace. And so your question is, hypnotically, how might that work? So if you take a look at what makes a whole person, and when one goes into grief, those parts, they get reworked. Sometimes they get shattered and they have to be rebuilt. And it takes some time to do that. And what people say about grief is, in time it will be better. But my question was, how does time heal? We know that time heals. I wanted to know how. And full disclosure, I came to my new paradigms of grief on the basis of my husband, best friend, and professional partner died a little over 2 years ago. And I found that no model was helpful to me at that time. And it was like, what the heck? That we need to have something that is a better model. And so the way that time heals, and if you hear nothing else, hear this: time heals daily and hourly. And that the study of chronobiology was the most important for me. And that's what I brought with me when I was needing to come to terms with my own grief. And, spousal loss from a really successful, happy marriage is huge. It's not a small thing. And so I wanted to know, what's important. And the first thing that's important is to have an open mind. People will say, oh, you never get over it. I want everybody to reject that statement. When someone tells you you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life, why would you ever believe that? Especially if you've been so happy and now you're very, very sad. Most likely you're very sad. Most likely you're feeling a certain amount of relief. Some people feel other things, where they're hard on themselves. But I'm just going to focus on, the positive things. And so if you have an open mind, if you can trust yourself to be honest with yourself and stay in the present moment, and to appreciate that you really don't know what's going to happen. You really don't know the future. You can't know all of this stuff. And so in understanding that when you don't know, that's opening up an opportunity for something new to come forward. So, but the idea of living in the present moment, and I'll get to the hypnosis part of it, but you got to have the foundation first. So what happens in grief is that 3/4 of you is in the past, like reviewing the past. And then there's this part that's in this unknown future, because you really don't know. You might know basics of what are going on, but as your entire neuronal system is being rewired, that now that this person that was the center of your world is gone, it takes time to make that, to allow that to happen. So with time and in chronobiology, the twos that are most important, Ernie loved the 20-minute break. That was the rest and rejuvenation time that happens every hour and a half or two. What I discovered that I wish I could tell him is there's another 20 minutes in there that happens in deep grief. And that is when you're in a really difficult spot, crying, confused. Sometimes you don't even know where you are. You don't know what year it is. I mean, there were times that I was not sure if I was alive or dead. Like, I mean, I'm talking about these really radical things. And so I decided to time that when it happened. And I would say 99% of the time that I was in deep, deep, deep despair, it lasted 20 minutes. And then nature popped me out to give me a break and a relief. And so I knew that I could go into that depth of despair, knowing that it was time limited. Now, what this matters for the therapist is that when you understand how to apply chronobiology, now it's not always 20 minutes, it could be 90, it could be 45, so you can't, it's not a linear thing, it's an experiential thing. But the person will come out of that. And the longest, I think, in therapy that Ernie and I used to be co-therapists together, and the longest the person stayed in deep despair was actually 3 hours. And we worked in sessions, that double sessions, and in this case, we had the time. We worked until that 3 hours was up. But when you know that on average, and you test it out for yourself, that lasts 20 minutes, and then you get a little break. Now, I'm not saying that, you want to go out and dance and smile. I'm just saying that you're not into that really deep spot. So when you're in this really deep place of, call it contemplation, call it misery, call it confusion, a dark night of the soul, that you naturally are going to go into hypnotic-like trances. That happens all by itself. So when you're in therapy and that's happening, it's a natural thing. And you ride that wave of that. And that's where the person needs the courage. So the depth of that the client themselves is going to go into the depth that they need. Have you ever experienced that, Jan, with your clients?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And when that happens and you're seeing them that they're in this really deep, deep, difficult spot, how on the inside of you do you respond to that?
On the inside, I mean, that depends on what is in there, but most of the times it's touching in some way. I mean, you respond to it with some kind of emotions
Mm-hmm.
inside.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens in you.
Mm-hmm.
If we use the metaphor of mirror neurons,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that we can understand that from that point of view. So it kind of fires something in me, mimics maybe something, but generally from the experiential point of view, something happens inside.
Mm-hmm.
You're I mean, maybe you're joining them in some way in this.
Well, the other thing is that, do you have confidence that they're going to come out of it?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a certain part of you that can be relaxed
Yeah,
as a
certain of first of all, have that kind of certainty that it won't last forever.
yes, and so you can really be with this person and you can help them to stay there, sometimes for just a little while longer, to see what comes next. But you
And
have the eyes to see and the experience that knows that they're going to come out of it. And as they come out of it, they're going to be a little different than when they went in.
mhm. And the difference comes from acceptance, from you know from some kind of transformation or other processes. How do you see that?
It's that what I discovered is that there's 8 dimensions of grief.
Okay.
So that the conventional wisdom about grief for a lot of people has been Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the 5 stages of grief that she founded. And I deeply admire her work. And her work was predicated on those that were dying, not on the survivors. And so when you think about her principles, they totally apply to somebody that is in the process of dying. That they might be in denial, they might be angry, they might be depressed, they might be bargaining, and they have a certain element of acceptance. But when I ran those ideas past myself, the only one that applied was acceptance. And so I think that as we expand to, build on what she's done, but maybe expand this a little bit more. Now, I was very, very sad, but depression is a clinical diagnosis, and I was never depressed. I was very sad. And people, that's the other thing they tell you. Oh, you're going to get depressed, which can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's reframing into sadness, I think is really important. And then take the wait and see. It's like, well, you might go into depression. We'll deal with that if it comes. But right now you're really sad. And 100% of the time that I've said this to people, they've said, yeah, that's right. I'm really sad. Well, sadness is like the clouds. They're going to pass in the sky. It's going to become sunny, cloudy, sunny, cloudy. And so it's not this life sentence of being depressed. So obviously, one of the dimensions of grief are emotion. And I found that nobody needs any help with that. They're emoting all over the place. And so I don't have to concentrate on a person's emotions or even ask altogether that many questions. They're doing fine on their own with that. But
Mhm.
another, which might sound funny for me as a psychologist, but what I know emotions are saying, they are screaming, I'm alive. I'm alive. And there is a passion in grief that shocked me. I mean, it was probably the most passionate thing I've ever been through. And it's almost like addicting, this passion. And totally unexpected. But this level of emoting, it's really something. So there's a social dimension. We're not here alone. And so that in the course of grieving, this is where therapists can be really helpful, because there's a social interaction that happens there, but it's on the client's terms. And so in regular social life, there might be this clinging or this avoidance that happens socially, but it's coming back to being your full social self. Cognitively speaking, it's what you're thinking, it's what you're saying, it's that the cognition, it goes all kinds of places where there's just all of these dimensions. And when you put space and time together, you get the 4th dimension. And I had a whole lot of that. It's like where the linear thinking was, it was all over the place simultaneously. And I'd like to refer to it as almost quantum consciousness. I don't think I'm explaining myself as well as I'd like to, but just to say that it's not like you're split. It's just that you're simultaneously experiencing so much stuff at the same time in your head, unlike any other thing that I've ever been through. And I found that absolutely fascinating. It was like the lines got blurred between heaven and earth. it's very difficult, to explain. Experiencing it is another
Mhm.
aspect of it. There's a physical dimension of pain, of the pain of losing someone. And, I use this first time I've used the word pain, but literally it's physically painful that I made mention that your body has to reorganize itself. That the way that you experienced when you were having this person to reflect on, and now they're gone, and your brain and body needs to restructure its neuronal connections. And then, behaviorally, things change. They're not the same. So you have to come to equanimity of how to sleep again, how to eat again, how to get out and exercise again, how to join in the world. There's a cultural dimension that is also very interesting in that, how do you fit in? And for a lot of people, when they're experiencing grief, they don't feel like they fit into their culture anymore, especially if their culture is telling them what their experience should be, and they're not having
Mhm.
that. And then the spiritual dimension, where, who am I? What does it mean? What do I believe? And it's always good from time to time to rework, and, what do I believe? And then the last one is philosophically, and that one is real simple: who am I? So all of these dimensions have a different experience inside, and also, hypnotically. So we're whole people, mind, body, and soul. And so
So
for
wait for a moment. So just to summarize that part, uh, do I understand correctly that what you say is actually that the main goal, the main like goal for a person in that mo- being in that moment in life is to create new identity or recreate identity to define ourselves in a new way to.
absolutely, absolutely, because here's the deal: it's your evening time, it's my morning time right now. And you're different now than you were this morning. And when you wake up tomorrow morning, you're going to be different. We're constantly growing, we're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving. When a big loss comes, it's like somehow all of that stuff it like speeds up. And so, really, on a day to day basis, you can ask yourself, who am I? And that's an honest question. But when it comes to like all of these other grief dimensions, when you're asked, especially if you're questioning your spirituality, you're questioning your cultural identity, you do have to come to terms with, well, who am I? What do I believe? What's important to me? And it might be that you work all that stuff through and it's exactly the way that it was before, or it might be different, but it's honest. And that's where acceptance comes from.
So, well, so acceptance comes from that process, or is a vital part that enables that process to you know be carried out or
I
take
think
place.
it's a result of. I think that, because, going on this roller coaster ride of a journey, and, it's ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs and downs and downs and ups and ups, all of that sort of thing, where, um, your job during that time is to simply tune in and to be present to the greatest extent that you can be, and wonder how it's going to resolve itself. And actually knowing that it will eventually resolve itself
So.
for most people.
Mhm.
For most people, there are people that get stuck in the past and that they then, um, do not evolve. But that is not the nature of a psychotherapy client.
So another question that I may have here is, so you outlined all those dimensions,
Mhm.
and you said that each can be uh, addressed differently with or by or in hypnosis. Well, so the question is, uh, oh, let me just that there are some comments here
Okay.
based on what we are talking about. Monica wrote uh, uh, that she wrote, I think that the loss um, is actually a learning about ourselves. It's an opportunity to learn about ourselves, uh, experiences connected with the loss tells us a lot about ourselves.
I
So
love you, Monica,
we
because
can,
because
yeah.
that's exactly the attitude to take. And it's not, there's nothing that I found that was easy about this process. But what I believe in is the novelty numinosum neurogenesis effect. And so the process of deep grief, it is so surprising. I was actually fascinated by that I could be that low. It's like I'd never been that low. I was fascinated by that. And I wondered how long it was going to last. And I knew that it wasn't going to last. So I tried to experience it fully each time. I didn't push it away. And when you can go through a process, like I call it fear free, of just saying, okay, bring it on. I'm here right now. I know it's time limited. I'm going to, give it to me now. And each time when it lifted, I could feel that. It's like, oh, well, that unit of work is done. But it was a really novel experience. And sometimes it was numinous because it was so fascinating. Who knew you could go that low? And that is going to affect neurogenesis. It's how you're growing your neurons, making the new connections. So yes, Monica, I love you. That's perfect. Do that.
So you're also saying that there's, I mean, when I'm listening to what you're saying, I think that to myself that in this attitude of, oh, how deep can I actually go with that? How much can I experience? There's a lot of bravery in that.
Huge. Yeah.
How to harness that within a client that is like, devastated by losing someone at the beginning of the process?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the difference with me, it was, I like to say the way that the Spanish language says it, pandemico. It sounds better than pandemic.
Yeah.
But 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 with the pandemic, and it was in the heart of everybody stay home, avoid, you can't have people over. I didn't have a choice. I was alone. And so I didn't have a choice with this. But I'll tell you what, that would have been a great time to have a psychotherapist because when the psychotherapist can be brave for you and with you and teach you to be fearless just by their example. Because as psychotherapists, if we're afraid of where the client is going, we're going to stop them. They're going to feel it. But if we can, just literally be surprised, it's like, wow, they went lower than I've ever seen anybody go. Whoa, that's really interesting. Gee, something inside me, um, you know, that there's like this fascination. And so it's for the psychotherapist to be brave and to have that courage. And in this process, it's a stage 2 of the creative cycle. And exactly what you need in stage 2, 100% of the time, is courage. But imagine this, you get to the other side of it and you find out, hey, I do have courage. I'm a warrior. I made it through.
So that's a huge change in attitude.
Mm-hmm. And then it's in the category of why not? Most of us have been very strong in our lives. It's like, well, then why not now too? I think you said there was a couple of questions, Jan.
Well, yeah, but so addressing the one question that I started to ask you before. So how to address those levels that you actually outlined differently within the hypnotic context? How can
Well,
hypnosis be useful?
in the way that I work, I always follow. I almost never lead. And so, because if you're leading, then you're making the decision about what's important for the client, and
Mhm.
particularly when it's in grief, it's not yours to decide. And I will do a little bit of psychoeducation
Mhm.
where it's appropriate. And so I might even do something like, bring up these 8 dimensions and to see if they resonate with any of them. And so it's not like, I know a lot of times in therapy people will say, all right, week 1 we're going to deal with emotions, okay, week 2 we're going to deal with social, week 3 we're going to deal with physical. And it's like, no, this is too linear. But when the person comes in and they say things like, I am so nauseous. My heart hurts so much. I have a huge headache. And they're in grief. This is by inference, not by scientific study. But my experience when my neurons were rewiring themselves, the first thing they did is they retracted connections. And it was physically painful. And I could tell, and it felt like I was vertigo, being hurled backwards, even when I was sitting in a chair with a headrest. And I realized that this is the felt sense of these neurons retracting. Let me tell you, if I didn't understand this, I would have been really frightened. I didn't know if I was going to lose my mind, that it was like that intense. But that which is happening, so it was not a common headache that I had. And when I had the a couple weeks later, like literally angina pains, but
Mhm.
I knew that my heart that wanted to touch Ernie, and he wasn't there, and that had to be rewired. Later on, it was in my stomach, where, I mean, just churning. And of course, like, running back and forth to the medical doctor, it's like, am I okay? Is there something wrong with me? And it's like, with my heart, it's like, nope, your heart's good. I did that in the emergency room. My gut, I pretty much knew what was going on at that particular point in time. But uh, uh, so if a person is coming in and they're talking about a lot of physical symptoms, you stay with that, and it's really interesting. And then, the question, as you're going in, like hypnotically, it's like, well, um, um, I wonder where it will go next. And depending, because when someone is experiencing a lot of pain, they would like to experience less pain. That one's true. And depending on when you symptom scale it, and if they say to you, well, doctor, um, it's a 10 out of 10. It's like, okay, let's breathe. Because, if they're at their max. But if they say things like, well, it's a 7 out of 10, it's like, oh, that's very interesting. I wonder if you could make that worse, like just for 1 minute. And they'll look at you like you're nuts. But then often they'll go into trance, and you're timing it. That 1 minute means 60 seconds. It doesn't mean 65 seconds. And in 1 minute's time, it's like, okay, It's been 1 minute. Where are you now? And you give them a moment, and they'll usually say that it's lower. It doesn't matter if it's higher, it doesn't matter if it's lower. If there's a change, then you can tell them, wonderful, you're affecting a change on that. If you made it higher, you can make it lower. And so often they will. So that's just an example of sometimes with the physical. But, other times with the physical, of course, you would ask, it's like, is it okay if I hold your hand? For instance, because sometimes a
Mhm.
physical touch is really appropriate at that time. I have, even if someone is in great, great pain, and if I feel in my heart that the best thing I could do for them is to give them a hug. I'm a big hugger, so it's not unusual for me. And then it's like, yeah, I would. And then I just hold, for a few minutes, and to help them transition over that. So that's like the physical aspects of it. More often what you come across is the philosophical. It's like, I don't know who I am anymore. It's like, wow, is that really true? Yeah, I really don't know who I am. Wow, you really don't know? I emphasize the I don't knows. And it's like, no, I really don't know. I said, okay, I wonder what it would be like to go deeply inside to where you feel the most comfortable in your body right now. That's always a shocker. It's like, no, I'm miserable. What are you talking about? But eventually, you find something that that they're comfortable with. It's like, okay, just stay there for a moment or two, and let's see what happens next. Let's see if it moves. And when they start to get in a little comfort, so they're not as anxious, then they're into a trance, and you can just watch their face and say, yes, yes, you're receiving. What are you receiving? Keep that private all to yourself. You can tell me later. But as you go inside and you make this journey, so I work very indirectly, so less with that's my style, but more often than not it's like that. And then generally people will say, I'm actually a really nice person, or I'm really suffering regrets right now. That's my problem. I'm really suffering regrets. And then it's like, well, what about those regrets? I don't think I did enough. Really? You don't think you did? No, I don't. I didn't do enough. Do you think that's true? Like, so you ask a lot of questions. Is this helping to make sense, Jan?
Yes, but that's a lot of knowledge. I mean, so the basic question was, can hypnosis help with grief, to with grief, with the loss of someone that is close, that is dear to us, and if yes, then how? And now I know that we are actually talking about that for a while, but if you were to sum it all up so that one can have a brief kind of answer to that question, what would it be?
Well, the answer to the question is yes, and the answer to why it's the answer to the question is that when a person is going through grief, they're working on multiple levels of consciousness simultaneously. When you're involved in hypnosis, a lot of times that's on the unconscious to preconscious levels. And so it's a really good match in working with hypnosis with grief, as long as you're letting the client guide you. So you're not making something happen for that person. You cannot lift anyone's grief. They can only lift their own grief. And so I realized I talked about a lot of things of, answering the questions of the process of it. But this is through a lot of years of experimenting and experiencing and getting feedback from clients over the years of how I can be there, how I can listen, and when it's appropriate to plant a seed. Because, of course, what people want to know is that there's going to be peace again in their life, that there's going to be comfort again. So part of it can be the psychoeducation. It's like, yes, it takes like 3 weeks to birth, to birth a new neuron and to grow it to be where it's a full neuron. And then it's going to take another couple of months before it makes the connections throughout, your brain and body. And so you look at change, not daily, but you look at it seasonally. And, like 3 months have passed, where am I now? It's a better question to ask. So I know with this psychological stuff, Jan, there's all of these, spirals, these interacting spirals.
Mhm.
And so none of the answers are linear. And I apologize to the
Yeah.
audience for that. But if I've sparked some attention and interest in you, then it's something you can take further. And the other thing is that I have 2 papers I've written on these aspects of grief, and it's on my website, which is my name, KathrynRossi.com. And, so you click on where it says grief to peace, and it will go to these papers. And so you can look at them if that interests you.
Yeah, maybe we can translate them into Polish so that people that are actually Polish speakers
Oh,
can
yeah.
have an access to those also. Now, I know that the person who actually asked those questions is the one that is actually dealing with the process of grieving and mourning themselves now. So, a question from me actually, but I think that may be an like important thing to that person. So it probably hurts a lot since that question was asked here, and the person is actually looking for some kind of remedy or
Mhm.
resolution. So I I imagine that if she was with us now, she would probably say it hurts a lot and I miss him or her, and
Mhm.
it's very difficult and so on. So what would you say to that?
Well, that of what I would say to anyone that is going through grief. And this is one of the questions come up where people don't know what to say. And what I have to say is, I'm so sorry. I have no idea what that's like for you. And after you say that, the person can speak about, well, let me tell you what it's like for me. And often people are, they go into, well, when my husband died or when my grandmother died or, this sort of thing. And well, that's, lovely. It doesn't help the person that's in the heart of grief, because the truth is everybody's going to experience it differently. And what I can say is, because I don't know about how soon, recent this loss is, or if it's been going on for a while, or the depth of connection. But what I do know is how time heals. And that it's, this is science. This is not, a metaphor. And that when you have the courage, when you're in the depths and you have the time and space to just stay with it and see what happens, you might find that, that it moves a little bit, and then it moves a little bit more. And then I do believe in that you look, you tune in seasonally to say, okay, where am I now? Like,
Mhm.
we've just really kind of started the autumn, and but actually we're in the middle of the autumn, and so in another month or so, we're going to be in winter. And so when you think about where you are today and then where you are in the winter, Do you notice I have not indicated where you are on any particular holiday? Because that's not going to be helpful. Like, where am I on New Year's Day, or that sort of thing. Where am I at Hanukkah? Where am I at Christmas? Where am I at Kwanzaa? No, 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 no. Don't, tie it to that. But it's just this gentle type of recognition of how far you've come. And only you really know that. And so my heart reaches out to you in this loss, in this change. But I do know that as time goes on, it becomes easier to live in the present moment instead of in the past or in the future, and that to cherish that, and that nature every hour and a half or two throughout the day or night will bring you, at least for a few minutes, into the present moment. And you can just ask yourself the question, I wonder if that could last just a little bit longer, and a little bit longer, and a little bit longer. And appreciate and love yourself. And know that, in my opinion, the person might be gone, but my love continues and grows. I love Ernie more now, 2 years since he left his mortal body, than I did back then. I loved Ernie more every day that I knew him. And I was very sad to think if that would end, but it did not end. It keeps going. And this is what I wish for everyone, is that it becomes a lesson of love and an appreciation for yourself. And lastly, I believe this. I believe that we do the best we can within the moment, even if we're on bad behavior, that we do the best that we can. And when you're caring for somebody, and sometimes you get cranky and things like that, you're still doing the best you can in the moment. And when a person dies, they kind of choose their time of their death, and sometimes they want another person with them, and sometimes they don't. And so that and then, I don't know, this may or may not be a popular thing, but it's what I think of, is that, well, I think that this person that I love so much, I think they're at peace now. And not everyone is going to feel that, but if that's true and honest for you, and that generally the people that you love, they really want you to be happy. They want you to find that again. They don't want you to continue to be sad. Ernie never wanted me to be sad for a day in my life. And you can hear in my voice, or you can see in my face, I'm not sad anymore. It happened. Yeah. But and I hope that, that my tenderness and my compassion helps to encourage this, allowing the process to become something new, and a new consciousness and a new depth.
Whoa.
Little light subject, for the day.
Yeah.
Well,
that was deep. I mean, and meaningful, and touched me. I don't know about all the other people listening to us, or that will be listening to us in the future, but I was touched.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad.
I am touched by that.
Yeah, I'm glad. Well, and Jan, you went through your own grieving process when Ernest died. That you loved him very much. It was really important to you. And I would say that you have grown so much in these last 2 years. Look how far you've come.
Yeah, that's true. And right after that, my grandma died, and so you actually were with me on that all the time, and we were both supporting each other, through all the process. So
Mhm.
that was a very meaningful period. Still
Are you
is.
happy when you think about your grandmother now?
Yes, I mean,
Isn't that wonderful?
she was
Because
incredible
that's
person.
what happens.
Mm?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what happens is that, and what a joy it is when that happiness returns.
Yeah, that's true. Plus, the fact that, I mean, I said to myself that the fact that it hurts means that all those things that were before that part were actually real,
Mhm,
and that the person was important. And so, I definitely choose to feel that now and have all those years of something really important, than the opposite. Because there are times when someone dies and you say, yeah, at last, but
right.
most of the times that means that that person was actually really strongly working on the fact, preparing you for that, so that you'll be happy after they go away. So I definitely prefer the you know the first option, where you are sad and you deal with that
Mhm,
in in many ways, because someone passed away,
mhm.
and that means that that it was worth it. So that
Well,
was my.
I mean, would you trade a day that you had with your grandmother?
Of
I
course
mean,
not.
and I mean, and that's the way that I look at it. And my
Mm,
father died when I was 13. So I came, there was a few important deaths before that, but I was so glad that I knew my father for 13 years. I was so glad. And it took a long time. It probably took me 10 years to come to terms with his passing.
mm,
And when 30 years passed, and after my father died and my mother died, that's when I came to peace with my parents and my father. And so this is the inspiration that I have. I don't want anybody else to have to take 30 years. I want it to be faster than that, Jan. And
mhm.
so in my heart, I just refused with my mother. It was not going to last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And it lasted 2 hours shy of 1 year. And my grief lifted from my mother. And I loved her unconditionally. And for Ernie, I got a big relief 1 year and 8 days after he died. I got a big relief. And then 2 years and 13 days after he died, huge relief. And so, but this is the tuning into how time heals, and the confidence that it will. So I know heavy subjects. So maybe next time
Yeah,
we'll talk about lighter subjects. But I'm glad that
yeah,
that you asked about it. I'm glad that that others asked about it, and I really hope that it can open up new doors and be helpful for the future, a bright future.
yeah. I'm it's even difficult to sum up everything now.
Well, the basically, people that are listening, you're in a hypnotic trance. It's okay. That something got going in you, and you just see where it's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, it launched so many associations, and now everything works somewhere deep inside.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, do we? I'm thinking about it. Are we actually? Do we want to go to some other subjects right now, or would you like to?
Oh, no, I think we've done it for today.
Okay. Yes. So maybe we'll just end up here. We were like live for an hour and 4 minutes and something. Maybe let's ask people that are still watching us. Uh, do you do you guys have any questions that you would like to ask us now after all that conversation? Okay, I don't know if there is a delay
Oh,
in the
there
live
can be.
stream.
Sometimes there can be, but I think that, when you get to these really, really, really important subjects, there's an internal process that goes on.
Yeah,
And, so in just letting that happen the way that it happens, and there may be people that are, watching or listening, and they're, in tears, they're in that difficult moment. There may be people that have been there and now they can feel that, that little sense of release and relief, and being able to live, regular life, to pet the cat, to water the plant, to take a hike, this sort of thing. But I think we're put on this earth to be happy, and we just have to figure out how to do it. And there are so many subjects that we can talk about, particularly like the deeper elements of hypnosis. And and so I just wish everyone a really happy day and an even better tomorrow.
yeah. So I'll just join that and wish you all just the same thing. And maybe we can just end up here. And, I'll just say one more thing, that probably we're going to come back in a month or so with another live episode of our conversation. So just stay tuned and watch for anything that comes out at the Facebook page of our institute. Uh, so I think that's it. Thank you very much. It was
All
a
right.
pleasure as usual. Thank you guys. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you to all those that's going to be listening to us later.
All right.
Thank you. This was another episode of our Experiencing Consciousness podcast. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jan. You're the best. Be well, be happy, celebrate life.